Hey, welcome back, everyone. Really glad you're here today, because what we're about to dive into is, honestly, one of the most mind-shifting conversations I've had in a long time around the topic of aging, immunity, and what it actually means to grow older well. So let me start with a question, and I want you to really sit with this for a second. What if the aging process, the way you feel at 50, at 60, at 70, wasn't primarily written in stone by your genetics? What if instead it was largely shaped by what you're doing right now, over the last 4 months? What you ate last Tuesday? How stressed you were last month? I know that might sound like something you'd see on a supplement label, but stay with me here, because today we're going to back this up with real science, real clinical data, and the real story of one man whose biology absolutely refuses to cooperate with the conventional narrative of aging. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Bland, and at 79 years old, he might just be the most biologically interesting person alive right now. Today, we're going to unpack his concept of immuno-rejuvenation, what it is, why it works, and most importantly, how you can start applying it to your own life. We're going to talk about your immune system's hidden 120-day renewal window. We're going to talk about food as biological information. We're going to get into mitochondria, the gut-liver immune axis, and some truly fascinating research on ancient plants that speak directly to your genes. And by the time we're done here, I think you'll walk away with a completely different perspective on what it means to take care of your body. Not just for today, but for the next 120 days. All right, let's get into it. So let's start with the story that really anchors everything we're going to talk about today. Dr. Jeffrey Bland is 79 years old. Now, in medicine, we have this concept of chronological age versus biological age. And in Dr. Bland's case, those two numbers couldn't be further apart. His father died at 73. His grandfather died at 73, both from chronic disease. And for a long time, Dr. Bland looked at that family history and understood it as a kind of inherited sentence, a biological ticking clock set to go off somewhere in his early 70s. But here he is at 79, not just alive, but operating biologically with the clinical markers of a 40-year-old. We're talking about cardiovascular biomarkers, inflammatory markers, metabolic function, and his testosterone, the levels of a man in his early 30s. That's not a typo. That's not a marketing claim. That's what his lab work shows. Now, when you hear something like that, the skeptical part of your brain probably fires up. And good it should. We're trained to be critical thinkers. So the first question we have to ask is, how? What is actually going on here? And the answer is not a pharmaceutical. It's not some cutting-edge gene therapy. What Dr. Bland has done, methodically, over the course of 50 years, is treat his own body as a research subject. He's applied the very principles he developed in the field of functional medicine to himself, adjusting and refining his approach based on real data, real biomarkers, and real outcomes. He calls this the pursuit of genomic potential. And the core idea is this: your genes are not your destiny. They are more like a set of dials, and the environment you create inside your body through food, lifestyle, sleep, stress management determines how those dials are turned. This is epigenetics in real time. The flagship concept that emerged from his work, and what we're going to spend most of today unpacking, is something he calls immuno-rejuvenation. And to understand why this is so powerful, we first need to understand something fundamental about your immune system that most people, including most doctors, never fully appreciate. Here's the thing about your immune system that I find genuinely astonishing every single time I think about it. Right now, as you're sitting here listening to this, Your body is producing over 2 million new white blood cells every single minute. Not every hour, every minute. Your immune system is not a fixed structure. It's a living, churning, constantly regenerating ecosystem. And here is the critical piece. Every 120 days, the cells that make up your immune defense are entirely replaced. Entirely. Let that sink in. 4 months from now, you will be running on a completely different set of immune cells than the ones you have right now. The question, and this is really the heart of immunorejuvenation, is what quality of cells are you going to get? Because here's where the fork in the road appears. And I think this is one of the most important concepts in all of modern longevity medicine. There are two possible trajectories for this cellular renewal process. The first trajectory is called immunosenescence. This is what happens in the absence of intentional intervention. As the body ages, as the cellular environment degrades from chronic inflammation, from oxidative stress, from nutrient deficiencies, from toxic burden, the new immune cells that are produced are functionally inferior to the ones they replaced. They're less responsive, less precise, more likely to misfire, and this creates a vicious cycle. Inferior immune cells lead to more chronic inflammation, which further degrades the cellular environment, which produces even more inferior immune cells in the next cycle. This is the biology underlying virtually every chronic disease of aging. Cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, autoimmune conditions. They all share this common upstream root, an immune system that's lost its precision and is generating chronic, low-grade inflammation, what researchers now call inflammaging. But the second trajectory, and this is where it gets exciting, is immuno-rejuvenation. This is the deliberate orchestration of that cellular replacement process so that the cells produced in each cycle are better than the ones before them, more resilient, more precise, more capable. Dr. Bland's framing of this is beautiful. He says the goal is to ensure that the cells we replace are better than the ones they came from, not worse. That's it. That's the whole mission. And it's achievable. Because here's the empowering reality underneath all of this. We are never stuck with an old immune system. We are only ever stuck with the system we've been building over the last 4 months. Think about what that means practically. It means that if you start making meaningful changes today, real changes to your diet, your gut health, your mitochondrial function, your phytochemical intake, the immune system you're running 4 months from now could be measurably, meaningfully better than the one you have today. That's not wishful thinking. That's biology. Now, I want to talk about how fast this change can actually happen. Because I think one of the things that keeps people stuck is the belief that meaningful biological change takes years, that your body is slow to respond, that you need to wait months before you see any difference. And the data says that's simply not true. Dr. Mark Hyman, another giant in functional medicine, has worked with literally thousands of patients using what he calls the addition diet. The concept is straightforward. For 10 days, you remove the most common inflammatory triggers from your diet: processed sugars, refined grains, industrial seed oils, common allergens like gluten and dairy, and you simultaneously flood the body with dense, phytochemical-rich whole foods. You're not just subtracting the bad stuff, you're adding in the good. And the results are, I genuinely don't have a better word for this, across a massive range of conditions: migraines, joint pain, depression, fatigue, skin disorders, digestive issues. Patients reported an average drop in symptom scores of 70% in just 5 days. 5 days. Not 5 months. 5 days. Now, why is that possible? How can the body shift so dramatically, so quickly? The answer lies in understanding that food is not just fuel. Food is information. Every bite you take is sending a cascade of molecular signals into your cells, turning genes on and off, modulating inflammatory pathways, instructing your immune cells on how to behave. When you change the information you're sending, the cellular response can be remarkably swift. And the clinical framework that systematizes this rapid biological pivot is what we in functional medicine call the 5R protocol. This is, in many ways, the operating system of functional medicine. And I want to walk you through each step, because each one addresses a specific layer of dysfunction. This is step 1, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You identify and eliminate the inputs that are creating biological noise. Inflammatory foods, environmental toxins, pathogenic microbes, allergenic triggers. This is not about restriction for restriction's sake. It's about clearing the signal. Think of it like noise-canceling headphones for your immune system. Replace. Here we add back what's been depleted. Digestive enzymes that help break down food properly. Bile salts that support fat absorption. Key micronutrients that modern diets often lack. Things like magnesium, zinc, B vitamins. This step is about rebuilding the biochemical infrastructure of digestion. Reinoculate. This one is huge, and it connects directly to the gut-immune relationship that we're going to explore in a moment. Reinoculation means restoring the healthy microbial community in your gut, using targeted probiotics, fermented foods, and a rich variety of prebiotic fibers. The goal is diversity and resilience in your microbiome. Repair. Now we turn to the structural integrity of the gut itself. The lining of the intestine is only one cell thick, a single layer of epithelial cells standing between the contents of your gut and your bloodstream. When that barrier is compromised through stress, alcohol, NSAIDs, pathogenic bacteria, you get what we call intestinal hyperpermeability, or leaky gut. Repair involves compounds like L-glutamine, zinc carnosine, aloe vera, and anti-inflammatory botanicals that help regenerate that lining. Rebalance. Finally, we step back and look at the whole system. Hormones, neurotransmitters, the autonomic nervous system, sleep architecture, stress response. Because all of these systems are interconnected. A chronically stressed nervous system, for example, will undermine all of the gut work you've done in the previous 4 steps. Now, this isn't theoretical. This framework is backed by decades of research. Back in 1991, Dr. Bland published some genuinely pioneering research that used sophisticated laboratory assays to connect gut health and liver detoxification to a broad range of clinical symptoms. He was using something called caffeine clearance testing to measure phase 1 liver detoxification. Essentially, how efficiently the liver's cytochrome P450 enzymes were metabolizing caffeine was a proxy for overall detox capacity. And he was using benzoate excretion testing to assess phase 2 detoxification, the liver's ability to conjugate and neutralize toxic compounds. What he demonstrated was that impairment in these 2 pathways, gut integrity and liver detox, was directly correlated with clinical symptoms across a huge range of diagnoses. And this gave birth to what we now call the gut-liver immune axis. Let me spend a few minutes here, because I think this is one of the most underappreciated pieces of the entire immune health puzzle. Most people think of the liver primarily as a detox organ, something that processes alcohol and filters the blood. And it does those things. But here's what most people don't know. Approximately 10% of the liver is made up of specialized immune cells called Kupffer cells. And these cells are extraordinary. Kupffer cells are the liver's resident macrophages. They sit in a network throughout the liver tissue, and their primary job is to sample the blood coming from the gut through the portal vein and make real-time decisions about the body's inflammatory state. Essentially, they're reading the molecular news from the gut and deciding how to respond systemically. When the gut is healthy, when the barrier is intact, when the microbiome is diverse and balanced, the messages Kupffer cells receive are calm and measured. The inflammatory response is proportionate. The immune system is in a state of what we call tolerant vigilance, ready to respond when needed, but not overreacting. But when the gut barrier breaks down, when you have increased intestinal permeability, things that should never enter the bloodstream start leaking through. Bacterial endotoxins, incompletely digested food particles, microbial metabolites that the immune system perceives as threats. And the Kupffer cells, doing their job, respond to these signals by ramping up inflammation. They release pro-inflammatory cytokines, TNF-alpha, IL-1, IL-6, and suddenly you have a systemic inflammatory response that's completely out of proportion to any actual threat. This is the origin of so much chronic disease. It's not happening because your body is broken. It's happening because your gut is sending distress signals that your liver's immune cells are faithfully responding to. When we implement the 5R protocol, when we heal the gut, restore the microbiome, and support liver detoxification, we fundamentally change the messages that Kupffer cells are receiving. And when the messages change, the inflammation changes. This is not anecdotal. This is mechanistic, documented biology. All right, let's talk about energy, because there's another dimension to immune function that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and it's absolutely critical to understanding immuno-rejuvenation. Here is a fact that I think is genuinely shocking the first time you hear it. When your immune system is fully activated, when it's fighting an infection, managing inflammation, doing its job, it can consume up to 50% of your body's total energy production. 50%. Half of everything your mitochondria produce goes to running your immune system. Now think about what that means for the quality of your immune response. If your mitochondria are healthy, efficient, and well supplied with the nutrients they need, CoQ10, B vitamins, magnesium, iron, NAD+, they can meet that enormous energy demand. Your immune cells have the fuel they need to operate with precision, to identify threats accurately, to resolve inflammation efficiently, to clean up the aftermath of an immune response without leaving a mess. But if your mitochondria are struggling, if they've been degraded by chronic oxidative stress, by nutrient deficiencies, by exposure to environmental toxins, by years of poor sleep, they can't keep up with demand. And this is where the system starts to break down in really serious ways. The first casualty of mitochondrial dysfunction in the immune system is the innate immune response. This is our most ancient line of defense, the one we share with organisms that have been on this planet for hundreds of millions of years. The key players in the innate immune system are macrophages, and I love Dr. Bland's description of these cells as Pac-Man-like defenders. They patrol the body's tissues constantly, engulfing pathogens, clearing cellular debris, and sending out alarm signals when something dangerous is detected. But macrophages are enormously energy-intensive cells. Their constant patrolling, their engulfment activity, their cytokine production, all of it requires reliable, sustained energy. When mitochondrial output is compromised, macrophages become sluggish. Their patrols become less frequent, their responses become less accurate, and the innate immune system's first line of defense starts to look more like a dozing security guard than a vigilant soldier. And here's where it gets dangerous. When that first line of defense fails to respond adequately and promptly, when it doesn't catch a threat early and resolve it cleanly, the immune system escalates. It brings in the heavy artillery. Cytokine production goes into overdrive, and instead of a targeted, proportionate immune response, you get what we've all heard about in the context of severe COVID infections, a cytokine storm. An immune system that's not failing because it's weak, but failing because it's lost its precision. It's reacting in a panicked, chaotic, disproportionate way because it never had the energy to do the job properly the first time. The chronic, low-grade version of this is what researchers call inflammaging, a state of persistent, smoldering inflammation that accelerates biological aging across every system in the body. The upstream intervention here is improving mitochondrial health. And the good news is that this is very much within our control. Through diet, through specific micronutrients, through exercise, through sleep optimization, and as we're about to discuss, through some very specific phytochemical compounds that directly influence mitochondrial biogenesis and function. I want to introduce you to a plant now that I find genuinely fascinating. And I know, saying, I find this plant fascinating is maybe not the most gripping sentence in the history of podcasting. But stick with me, because what this plant represents conceptually is far more important than the plant itself. Himalayan Tartary buckwheat is a flowering plant that has been cultivated in the high-altitude regions of the Himalayas for approximately 3,500 years. And the reason it's so interesting from an immunological standpoint is not the plant itself, but what it had to do to survive. Think about the environment these plants evolved in. Extreme temperatures, intense UV radiation, low oxygen, nutrient-poor soils, minimal protection from pathogens and insects. In that kind of environment, the plants that thrived were the ones that developed the most sophisticated chemical defense systems. Complex portfolios of bioactive compounds that protected them from oxidative damage, pathogen invasion, and cellular breakdown. And two of the most powerful compounds in that portfolio are quercetin and luteolin. These are flavonoids, polyphenolic compounds that have been extensively studied for their immune-modulating properties. But here's the thing I want you to understand about these compounds and about phytochemicals in general. They are not just nutrients. They are not just antioxidants. They are signals, molecular signals that speak directly to your immune cells. Specifically, compounds like quercetin and luteolin interact with toll-like receptors. These are pattern recognition receptors on the surface of innate immune cells, including macrophages and dendritic cells. Toll-like receptors are the immune system's sensory apparatus. They're how your immune cells detect threats and distinguish friend from foe. When phytochemicals like quercetin bind to these receptors, they're essentially providing training inputs, helping to calibrate the immune system's threat detection sensitivity, reduce the tendency toward overreaction, and improve the precision of the inflammatory response. This is food talking directly to your genes. This is nutritional genomics in action. And the color principle that Dr. Bland articulates here is such a beautiful way to think about this. Because different colored plant pigments represent different classes of phytochemicals with different signaling functions. The orange and red compounds, the carotenoids, like beta-carotene, lycopene, astaxanthin, these are powerful signals for cellular repair. They activate pathways involved in DNA protection, oxidative stress reduction, and tissue regeneration. The blue and purple compounds, the anthocyanidins and anthocyanins, found in blueberries, purple cabbage, black rice, red onions, these are particularly important for priming the innate immune system. Research shows they enhance macrophage function, improve NK cell activity, and reduce the chronic inflammatory signaling that drives immunosenescence. When you consume a diverse array of these colorful compounds, when you're eating what Dr. Bland calls the full spectrum of plant languages, you are engaging a regulatory cell population called T regulatory cells, or Tregs. And Tregs are extraordinary. They are quite literally the peacekeepers of your immune system. They patrol the immune landscape, identifying situations where the immune response has become disproportionate, where inflammation is persisting beyond its usefulness, and they actively suppress it. They are the de-escalators, the noise reducers, the cells that say, okay, threat neutralized, stand down. Chronic deficiency in Treg activity is one of the hallmarks of both autoimmune disease and immunosenescence. And the consistent consumption of a diverse, polyphenol-rich diet is one of the most powerful ways to support Treg function. This is not abstract biology. This is your lunch making decisions inside your immune cells. Let me zoom out now and talk about where all of this is heading from a medical technology standpoint. Because the principles we've been discussing today, immunorejuvenation, gut-liver immune optimization, mitochondrial medicine, are powerful on their own. But when you combine them with the emerging tools of precision medicine, the potential becomes extraordinary. We are right now exiting what I would call the Norman Rockwell era of medicine. You know the image: the family doctor with the stethoscope around his neck, a notepad in his hand, making a best guess diagnosis based on symptoms and intuition. That model served us reasonably well for a long time, but it is fundamentally limited by the amount of individual biological information it can incorporate. What's replacing it is something genuinely new. Let me give you some concrete examples. There's now a blood test called the PTA217 that can detect biomarkers of neuroinflammation associated with Alzheimer's disease decades before the first cognitive symptom appears. Decades. Think about what that means for early intervention. Think about what that means for applying everything we've discussed today: the gut-brain axis, mitochondrial support, phytochemical signaling, to prevent a disease that previously wasn't even on the radar until it was far too advanced to reverse. Platforms like Function Health are aggregating health data at a scale that was simply unimaginable 10 years ago. We're talking about 20 million biomarkers collected from over 180,000 individuals, analyzed in real time to identify patterns, trajectories, and predictive signals in human health. This is the kind of data set that allows us to move from "here's what's statistically normal" to "here's what's actually optimal" for a person with your specific biological profile. And then there's the AI layer. Artificial intelligence is now capable of synthesizing your microbiome metabolite profile, your genomic single nucleotide polymorphisms, those small genetic variations we sometimes call SNPs, your continuous glucose monitoring data, your sleep architecture, your inflammatory biomarkers, and generating a personalized lifestyle prescription that is specific to you in a way that no generalist protocol ever could be. One-size-fits-all medicine is not just suboptimal, it is obsolete. Because here's the thing. And this brings us full circle to everything we've been talking about today. Your 120-day immune renewal window is not just a biological phenomenon, it's a personalized opportunity. The specific foods, the specific phytochemicals, the specific gut interventions that will most powerfully drive immuno-renewal in your body are influenced by your unique genome, your unique microbiome, your unique history of exposures and stressors. Precision medicine gives us the tools to identify exactly what that personalized prescription looks like. We are moving from the era of the best guess to the era of the informed intervention, and it's happening right now. All right, let me bring this home. I want to leave you with the core message that underpins everything Dr. Bland has dedicated his career to, and everything we've explored today. Your body is a healing machine, not a machine that degrades and breaks down on a fixed timeline, not a machine that is helplessly subject to the genetic blueprint handed down from your parents and grandparents. A healing machine, one that is at this very moment producing 2 million new immune cells per minute, one that is constantly taking in molecular information from its environment and using that information to make decisions about how to build the next generation of cells. The question is not whether your body has the capacity to repair and renew itself. It does. The question is what kind of environment you are creating for it to do that work in. Remove the impediments, the inflammatory foods, the gut-disrupting toxins, the mitochondrial stressors. Provide the correct inputs, the diverse phytochemicals, the gut-supportive nutrients, the sleep and stress management that allows the parasympathetic nervous system to run its repair programs. And then get out of your own way. Your innate biological wisdom, refined over millions of years of evolution, will take it from there. Dr. Bland's story is not a miracle. It's not an anomaly that exists outside the reach of ordinary people. It is a proof of concept. It is evidence that the conventional narrative, that aging means inevitable decline, that your genetic inheritance is your biological fate, is simply not supported by the science. At 79, with the biomarkers of a 40-year-old and the testosterone of a man in his 30s, he is the living demonstration that immunorejuvenation is real, it is achievable, and it is accessible to anyone willing to take it seriously. And here is the most empowering thought I can leave you with. Your immune system is entirely new every 4 months. You are not carrying forward the same old tired cells from years of poor habits or difficult circumstances. You are building fresh, right now, today. So the only question left to ask yourself is this: what kind of immune system am I going to build over the next 120 days? I hope today's conversation has given you some powerful tools to answer that question. If it resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. I genuinely read them, and I love hearing how this material lands for different people. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do that now, because we go deep on this kind of science every single week. Until next time, take care of your body, because it is absolutely taking care of you.